So last year, the county mandated, and this is to all of the schools, that all 11th graders will take one of the college entrance exams, SAT, ACT, or Aggie Place. And to ensure that this happens, each school had to develop SAT, ACT, and Aggie Placer team, committee. And we've actually had this committee in the county in years past, but last year, the county is really focused in on really ramping up each school's efforts as it relates to these college entrance exams, because they're extremely important. That's what our kids work towards. Our kids work towards to get into a great college. So we want to make sure, not wait until they get to their senior year, but we want to make sure, exiting their junior year, that they have successfully passed and definitely taken one of those 3 exams. So here what we do at BCC as it relates to, and I'm going to briefly go over, like I said, I'm not going to go too much in depth into these 3 exams, because that's why we have our outside presenters. So essentially what I'm going to go through, I'm just going to talk about what we do here at BCC to ensure that our students are taking these exams, but then also how we can help prepare them, or how we are helping prepare them for these exams. I'm going to break it down. First, I'm going to go over Aggie Placer briefly, and then SAT and ACT. But once again, briefly, and our actual presenters will talk more about what the Aggie Placer is. So some of you might not even know what the Aggie Placer is. So don't worry. The presenter actually, Mr. Henry from the College Board, he'll talk more about exactly what the Aggie Placer is. So the Aggie Placer we actually use in conjunction with Montgomery College. So,
Mr. Robertson, is that presentation going to be on the website, or is it already?
It's not on the website. I can definitely have it put on the website.
Thank you.
So the Aggie Placer, we actually use it in conjunction with Montgomery College. We have a direct partnership with Montgomery College, and you'll hear a little bit more about this a little later on. I'm not specifically sure about the partnership with Montgomery College, but you'll learn a little bit more about the Aggie Placer. But essentially, the way we identify students to take the Aggie Placer, I reach out to counselors, I reach out to Mrs. Parmalee in the College and Career Center to identify students that might possibly be going to Montgomery College. It might be one of their options. So, as one of their options, students essentially take the Aggie Placer. It's an entrance exam for Montgomery College. And it's used actually across the country at some other community colleges, but we have a direct partnership and where we give the Aggie Placer for free within the high schools of Montgomery County. So essentially, if a student takes the Aggie Placer, they're either considered college ready or not college ready. So are they able to take college credit bearing courses, or are they not? At BCC, and pretty much throughout the county, students have 3 opportunities to take the Aggie Placer. So here at BCC, students have October, January, and May, end of May, early June, to take the Aggie Placer. They have 3 opportunities, just in case they don't pass it on one of these specific trials. The first time that we're actually going to be testing for the Aggie Placer will be October, I believe it's 19, the PSAT day. We will be testing students. That's going to be our first round of the Aggie Placer. So once again, we test for the Aggie Placer 3 times here at BCC. And what I'll be talking about in the next slide is essentially what happens if a student doesn't pass the Aggie Placer. Because once again, you have multiple opportunities to take the Aggie Placer. If you don't pass it the first time, you have multiple opportunities, but we don't just leave a student out there and say, okay, well, you didn't pass it, good luck next time. No, we have a lot of steps in between them taking the exam to help prepare them for the next time that they take the exam, and really hopes that they receive a college-ready score. So once again, so after the students take the test, I go back and I take a look at the scores to see if they receive a college ready or not college ready. College ready essentially identifies if they are ready to take college credit bearing courses, I meet with students actually before and after. So I actually meet with a group of students that are identified to take the Aggie Placer prior to taking the Aggie Placer, so they know exactly what they're taking. I don't just want to bring students into an exam and say, okay, here, you're taking the Aggie Placer, because most times students are not going to know what they're going to be taking. That's not fair to the student. So actually bring the students in, talk to them about what the Aggie Placer is, what the implications are, As far as the acuplacer goes, as far as, and it really, a big piece of it comes down to money, because students are either able to register for college credit-bearing classes or they're not, based upon their scores. So I explain all this to the students prior to them taking the test. I also send something out to the parents via email and also a letter to explain what the acuplacer is and also the implications of getting a college-ready, not college-ready score. After the test, I meet again with the students in separate groups. I meet with students that received the college-ready score, students that didn't receive the college-ready score. I explain to them the difference between the two, and I explain to them next steps. And once again, parents will, throughout this entire process, parents will receive, we always like to keep parents in the loop. And we tell them before the test, your child has been identified to take this particular test. And afterwards, we let them know, okay, your child received this score. College ready, that's what this means. This is the next step. Your child didn't receive a college ready score. Here are the next steps. So if a student is considered not college ready, so if a student is considered college ready, they're all set to go as it relates to the acuplacer. They're all ready to sign up. So let's say a student in October takes the acuplacer, a senior takes it. They know for certain that they're going to MC. They can apply to MC. They actually are able to apply to MC for free. The date, actually the cutoff date, I believe is in February, but Montgomery County Public School students are able to apply to Montgomery College for free all the way up until February. So the students are able to apply, and once the summer gets a little closer, then they're all set to actually register for their classes. If they're not college ready, we have various steps put in place, various resources put in place within the school to ensure that the student is getting the help that they need to get them over that hump so they actually pass the test. We have a series of during the lunch and after school sessions where we have peer tutors, so we have other students helping our students out with going through various online modules to help them gain the skills that they need to ultimately pass this test. We also have a math teacher that helps out with these after school and during lunch sessions. And constantly I am meeting with students, not just myself, I get help from Mrs. Parmalee, also get help from our college tracks coordinator and other individuals that are part of this team to help encourage students to come to these after school and during the lunch sessions to once again prep them for when they can take the test again. So once again, we have 3 opportunities to take the acuplacer. All right, so I'm going to finish up with just going over the SAT and ACT. So right now at BCC, we don't have a SAT or ACT prep class. But what we do have, and this is part of this SAT, ACT acuplacer team. So this is a team that I oversee. Included on the team is the English RT and the math RT. Mrs. Parmalee is also as the College and Career Center coordinator. She's also on the team. So essentially we put our heads together to see how we can, without a class, better help our students, particularly our juniors, be prepared for the SAT and ACT. So what we've used last year, and we're going to continue to use it this year, is Khan Academy. So Khan Academy has a direct partnership with the College Board. And essentially, Khan Academy is this online, it's a website. And they have various modules and various activities that are practice tests, essentially to help prepare students for the SAT. And it could also, it's directly related to the SAT, but we also use it to help prepare students with the ACT also. So essentially students in their English 11 classes coming up, they will sign up for Khan Academy. So you have to sign up for an actual account. And so students will be doing that very soon. And a great thing also about Khan Academy is going to directly link to the PSAT schools. So that's how we're also going to be using it in conjunction with our English and our English 11 and our Math 11 math classes. So essentially students, grade 11 students will be taking the PSATs very soon, in a couple weeks. At that point, they have already signed up for Khan Academy. Khan Academy, we're going to link their PSAT scores to Khan Academy, so when they go in to work on these various modules, it will be specific to that individual student. And it's more or less going to identify specific areas that the student needs to improve on. But major piece of this, we're working with the English and the math teachers to actually use this along with their daily lesson plan. So not as an add-on to say, okay, we're just going to go to the computer lab and actually work with Khan Academy, but actually to take a look at what they're working on within a unit and directly relate it to some of the modules within Khan Academy, so the students can actually, on a weekly basis, use Khan Academy, prepare for the unit assessments, but also be preparing ultimately for the SAT and ACT. And just finally, and this is what we're currently working on now, we have a Math and English Honor Society. We're currently working on developing during lunch tutoring sessions to where we'll be using Khan Academy and we'll also be using other resources to help provide tutoring for students for the SAT and ACT.
Is this, in the 11th grade English, is this part of the curriculum or is this optional?
No, it's not part of the curriculum. So what I'm doing, I'm working with the English and the math resource teachers, the department heads, to work with their teachers to include that within their lesson plan. So it's not part of the curriculum, but what we're really trying to work on is for them to actually take a look at various items within their curriculum. So take a look at a specific unit and identify a particular area within the unit where they could, in conjunction with prepping the students for that particular unit and ensuring they hit these various unit indicators, but also use Khan Academy to help build the skills that the students need to gain the skills for that particular unit.
So it's within the classroom, it's not extra?
No, it's not extra. It's within the classroom, and the way that we're trying to include it is where it's not an add-on. It's where it's actually, and not to put something more on the students, not put something more on the teachers, but to where it's like a natural fit. And it's also, it's having, it's helping out in two ways. Like I said, it's helping out understanding unit concepts, but then also helping to prepare for SAT or ACT.
So the subject matter for math, how far does it go? Does it go including pre-calculus or stuff before that, or after?
Yeah, it's like, I believe it's like right before pre-calculus.
And so if the students are already in 10th grade in pre-calculus, I mean, how does that fit into the daily lessons if the subject matter had already been covered a year earlier?
We try to do as best as fit, so it won't be able to fit into every daily lesson plan. So we're trying to do it at least where it's like at least once a week, to where it's infused into one of the lessons within a week. So no, it's not going to be able to fit directly daily because it's not part of the curriculum. But there are concepts within that are touched upon that students need to prepare for that are also covered within the curriculum.
How are students identified for the AccuPlacer? Before the test, you had after the test, but
So before the test, and essentially I reach out to the counselors. I also reach out to the College and Career Center because they're consistently talking to students about colleges that they're applying for. So any student that essentially has Montgomery College on their radar, I include them in on this initial meeting where I meet with the students and explain to them what the AccuPlacer is and encourage them to take it. Okay. But another caveat to the AccuPlacer, I also encourage students to take the essay, even students that are, any of my students, I say, don't just apply for one college. Don't just say, okay, I'm going to MC, apply for other colleges. And essentially, if a student takes the SAT or ACT and scores 21 on the SAT or 21 on the ACT or 500 on the math and English section, respectively, of the SAT, they're able to bypass the AccuPlacer. So I highly encourage students not just to take, the AccuPlacer, but also to take the SAT and ACT. Okay, I'm going to take one more question, and I don't want to monopolize the entire presentation. Obviously I work here, so you can, I'm going to actually get some cards. If you have any questions surrounding SAT, ACT, AccuPlacer as it relates to BCC, please shoot me an email, and I definitely will get back to you right away. I'll take one more question.
If students are in either an AP class or STAT and not in 11th grade English or math, how do they get this into their curriculum?
So that's what we're trying to, so last year what we did, we rolled it out to our English 11 classes, our pure English 11 classes. So right now what we're trying to do this year, and that's why I'm meeting with the team, and particularly meeting with the RTs to see how we can infuse it into other classes outside of this English 11, and it's some of our basic math classes. So that's what we're working on this year. All right, so I'm going to bring on Mr. Keith Henry from the College Board. I appreciate it. Thank you. Remember, contact me if you have any questions.
Good evening, everybody. I used to be a middle school teacher. I'm used to a little more energy this time of night. Good evening, everybody. Thanks. My name is Keith Henry with the College Board. I'm really, really happy to be here, and I want to applaud all of you. So I am a little farther ahead of this parenthood thing than you are. My daughter is 32, and so I've been through the college experience, and I wish when my daughter was in 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, I had attended something like this and learned the kind of things that you're learning about the college-going experience. And I thought, well, I went to college myself, so I thought I knew all of it. And now that I've been with College Board for over 6 years, I realized that I wish I had learned along the way the kind of things you guys are seeing tonight. So my congratulations for being here. You guys are doing some great things, taking some good first steps as far as understanding the ropes on college. And guess what? It's always different than when you went, right? So many of you have been to college, and that was a little while ago, we know, and so things have changed. And so you've heard the word acuplacer several times already tonight, so the question is, well, what in the heck is this acupuncture thing? And so acuplacer is the concept that's called placement. So many colleges, in fact, most colleges still want to know what you can do when you get to college. So you may be going to a 2-year college, and many 2-year colleges have an interesting problem. Half of their students are straight out of high school like your children would be, but the other half are returning adults who've been out in the workforce, raising families, been away from school for a while. And we all know what happens when you don't use something on a daily basis. It gets kind of rusty. And so colleges have to do placement testing to make sure they understand the needs of all the students. And so the tool that they tend to use is a placement test. Acuplacer is pretty much the one used across Maryland. And in the last year, we've evolved into being pretty much the majority test no matter where you go. And so what will happen, though, is the student will not necessarily be told it's acuplacer. They'll just be told you're taking a test to determine what courses you're going to take. And so acuplacer is going to help put that student into, hopefully, a college-ready course. I know that the previous speaker talked about college-ready. So what that means is you get to take a credit course immediately. If you don't place in the college level, what you take is called developmental, which is basically review remediation. It's a prerequisite, it's required before you take a credit course, but you have to take it and you pay tuition for it and it takes your time, but it doesn't count in your degree. So it's like you took no course at all, but you had to. And so think about the cost of college. A 3-semester course today is probably $700 or $800 plus a book. So each semester of math you might need to take, or English, reading, writing you might need to take, sort of slows you down. And so that's kind of the dilemma. And so that's why it's ultra important that your students do as much preparing here while they're still in high school as they can, so they don't face that when they go to the college. And by the way, Montgomery College and Montgomery County Public Schools have a great partnership, one of the very best in the country. I mean, I see 15 or 16 different states that I work in, so I know that this is one of the very best in the entire nation as far as that partnership goes. You guys are in great hands with that. But this is a nationwide issue. It's not just Maryland, it's not just here, it's everywhere. Everybody's trying to figure out how do we help students be better prepared And the answer is help them in high school. So that's the premise of all this. And so this slide really is kind of directed to the students. So when you take acupuncture, if you are a student and you haven't tried it yet or haven't had that experience yet, you will discover it's given on a computer. It's not timed. So unlike an SAT that you've taken, there's not a clock ticking. So you can take as long as you need. It also only gives you one chance on that question because the next question is chosen based on what you've done before. So it's fewer questions, less time than paper pencil, but you can't go back and change your mind. So you get to stay as long as you want on one question, do your best, and kind of put it out of your mind and go on to the next. And the computer chooses that next question based on how you've done. So maybe you start out at the middle, which everybody starts at, is kind of the middle, and maybe you do really great. So the next question is a little harder, and a little harder, and a little harder, and then you start to miss and it may go down a little bit in difficulty. And the final score that comes out is based on how hard the things you saw were, plus whether they were right or not. And so there's a lot of psychometric detail, test design detail behind all that. And we've got some really great experts in College Board that know how to do this kind of work. And so the test is very reliable. If the student knows what they know, they come out with pretty much the same score every time. And so again, this may be a recap, but this is used across Maryland in both the 2-year colleges and the 4-year colleges. And so it's not something that's just a community college tool that is used pretty universally. Our information shows that we have about a third of our users who are high schools doing what Montgomery County is doing, helping prepare students. A third are the 2-year schools, and a full third are the 4-year schools. So just because somebody might be aiming toward a 4-year school doesn't mean they won't see acupuncture. They very well might see it. And a student who's taken ACT or SAT and earns a score the college sets could be exempt from acupuncture and go right straight to that credit course. Or they may earn a score that gets them into college, but still not earn the exemption. So they may be in, but they didn't get exempted, so they still... Okay, I thought my cafeteria duty voice from middle school would still help, but I guess not, so we'll do this. So anyway, so you might be admitted to your college based on your ACT or SAT and still have to take placement testing. And so again, this is kind of a recap. So you may be placed into college level coursework, or you may have to take developmental. And unfortunately, a lot of the statistics show the more developmental courses a student takes, the less likely they are to finish their degree. And so some places, some institutions I see have 2 and 3 and 4 different levels of math that you've got to get through before you hit your college credit course to say, now I'm finally in my major, this is what I came for. So the more of that students tend to have to take, the less likely they are to stick around and finish, which is what everybody in the room wants to see. You want your child to finish that degree, right? You want them to start and finish and earn that credential so they can have a great career that you've all been planning for as a family. And so with all that, it's extra time, it's extra money that you don't want to spend in tuition. So being better prepared now here in high school is a real plus and a real key. So I'm going to share this slide deck with Mrs. Parmalee in email later tonight or tomorrow, so I'm assuming, will be able to see this. It'll be posted, so I'm not going to talk a lot about what's on the tests, but I would say that on the math side, there's the lowest level test is arithmetic, and there are many high school kids who've had great careers in high school, took AP, did well on SAT, ACT, and somehow they forgot the arithmetic part and got stuck. And based on how the college set this up, they may go to developmental because they can do great math up here, but they forgot the basics down here. So sometimes students get stuck on it even though they've really taken rigorous, hard math later on. But there's an arithmetic test that's the lowest level, an elementary algebra test that's the middle, and a college level math that many places will use to put students into trig courses or calculus courses. So different levels of tests, and they're all set up to say if you earn a certain score on this test, you might go to the next one, either a great score that sends you to the harder test, or a lower score that sends you back down to the arithmetic. So each campus or each college is a little different, and that's one of the challenges from the high school point of view, is knowing what your student will see when they get to the college they're going to, because no two colleges do this exactly alike. On the reading side, there's a reading comprehension test, And there's a sentence skills test. It's kind of a writing test. It's multiple choice in terms of helping the student understand what good writing is and what does the first sentence do for the second. Does it contradict? Does it expound on it? Is it just a restatement of the same thing? So it's understanding whether the student can revise writing. And then there is a third test on the English side that is a writing test. It's called Write Placer, and the student actually is given time to write an essay right into the test, into the software, and it's automatically scored by the software. And if they write something too different, maybe too great, or too not great, so it's too different than what the software can do, people grade it. So there's still always that people check behind the grading. But what this does is gives a score that a college might use to say your reading score, your sentence skills score, and your writing all combined decide which English course you go into, or whether you need to have developmental reading. We've talked a lot about math, but this also works on the writing side. So a student who really is not quite as prepared in reading might take a level or two of developmental reading. So the possibility is the student might have a little math to do and a little reading and writing to do before college level work. So having said all that, what can students do to prepare? So it's ultra important to know that this is a possibility that you want to prepare in advance. So 3 different things I'm going to show you quick examples of. The first one is that our College Board AccuPlacer website has lots of detail for students and parents to help understand what is on the test. Because being familiar, it's not the different content, it's the same content that students are learning in Maryland. It's the same content they see on ACT, SAT, but it's still good to know how one test is designed differently than another. So you're not learning different content, but maybe being familiar with the way the questions are asked will help. The second thing is we have a sample question document. I've put the link in here, so when you get the PowerPoint, you can go to it. And also we have a free practice app. So in the same way that we heard about Khan Academy a few minutes ago with the partnership between College Board and Khan Academy, this is a free study app as well. It's not Khan Academy, it's by our AccuPlacer program, but it's free. And so here's what the website looks like. So you can see if I was really on the web, I could scroll through, I could click the link to say, what are the tests, how do I prepare, what's on it. You see the question here about how does it work. So it gives the student a lot of access to information as much as they need to understand the process. And then we have a sample question booklet. Many colleges link to this booklet on their website so students can grab this for themselves. And so here you see a brief description of what's on this test, and then you see sample questions, and at the back of the booklet is an answer key. And then the third thing is the idea of the practice app, the study app. So this is free. It needs web access, and so you can run this on a computer. But if a student also has a smartphone that can do internet, they can run this on their phone or on their tablet. So their iPhone, their iPad, their Galaxy, whatever they have, they can use this. In any gadget they can get to, they will go to the internet. And so it gives them a chance to see each of the 5 different tests that are available. And there are 2 different ways they can do this. One is learn as they go, where they get a question and they get the feedback, you were right, you were wrong right away, but also the rationale. A was the right answer, here's how you should have figured that out. And then B, C, and D weren't, and here's why they weren't. So it helps the student reason through the question and why they, yes, I got that right, and I had the exact right reason, or I got it right, but I'm not too sure how I did it, or, ooh, I missed it. So that gives them a sense of where they stand. And so here's an example of a question. So you can see a reading question across the top. The green and red boxes show me I've gotten 3 right and I've missed 3. And then you see the question on the left is the reading passage. The right has the question, and you see the 4 answer choices. And then if I answer this, you see to the bottom right, it tells me I actually got the answer wrong. Just because I work for College Board doesn't mean I have all the answers to all the tests. And then you see the rationale. It explains why D was right and A was not right, which was my choice or my answer. And at the end of this, it gives the student a summary of how they did. So overall, when I did this, and I did this for the example to put on the screen, so I wasn't really doing this, but I got 11 out of 20 right, so 55%. But you can see to the right, it gives me the categories to say, well, in this category, the first category, I got 5 out of 7 correct. The second category, 3 out of 8. The bottom category, 0 out of 2. So, ooh, if I'm going to focus my time and spend it where it's most valuable, maybe that's where I should study. So that's the kind of resource available. So hopefully you have a little better sense of what AccuPlacer is, that whether you're going to a 2-year school or a 4-year school, you may take it. If you go to a 2-year, it's almost 100% sure the student will need to take it. If a 4-year school in Maryland, it's quite likely. And I think whether you end up having to take it or not, being prepared for it is a good thing. And if you say, wow, I didn't have to take that after all, that's great, but I'd rather see you be, wow, I'm off the hook on that, as opposed to, ooh, I didn't know about that. And I wish I'd had more time to think about it and plan ahead and study some. So hopefully this information gives you something to get you started. I see a hand.
Just a quick question. Should juniors start with this or wait until seniors?
So that's a great question. Her question was, should juniors start on this or wait to the senior year? We actually see a lot of districts doing juniors as a good time to do this so that it doesn't become a senior year emergency. Also, the state of Maryland passed a law last year that every district has to focus on college and career readiness. And by 11th grade, every student should be tested. And so AccuPlacer is one of the options. And so most districts in Maryland have adopted AccuPlacer. Many are doing the kinds of things Montgomery County has been doing for a long time. So they kind of looked at you guys and said, wow, they're doing it really well. Let's pick up what they're doing. But yeah, junior year is a great time to do this so it doesn't become an emergency in the senior year on top of the ACT, the SAT, and all the fun things that happen in the senior year. So, other questions? And I want to make sure I'm respectful for everybody else's time too. So, other questions? Yes, sir?
Is there a list of all colleges that require AccuPlacer for first-year students present?
We don't publish a list on that, and the reason we don't is we give access to the test to colleges, and they say we don't want to be identified as a user, or we do. So we would have a hard time compiling a list of colleges that's actually accurate, but you can go to each college's website and see information about their testing program. So I sent around the room 2 documents. One is the flyer for the free study app that's College Boards. The other is I sent around the testing information from Montgomery College. And so that gives you an example of what you should be looking for on a college's website. And they may not call it AccuPlacer. They'll just call it the placement test or the test or something generic. They may not use the trade name AccuPlacer, but look for that kind of information on whatever college's websites you are looking at, because it's in there somewhere. If you just go to their site and Google the word testing or placement testing or entrance testing, you'll see that they've listed their details. So hopefully that gives you some sense. You have an example in your hand now of what it is for the college that many of your students may go to, but look for that everywhere else and you should find it. Okay, other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
On the AccuPlacer test. No worries. So my name is Ned Johnson. I'm a founder and a tutor over at Prep Matters, Philpine Capital Educators. We have been involved with DCC for a while. invited every year to give a diagnostic ACT that we give and a diagnostic SAT that capital educators have kind of to give. And the whole purpose of these and this conversation tonight is simply so that you all can be relatively informed about what the SAT is, about what the ACT is, and then explore the opportunities that the ECC provides so that your son or daughter can know what each of these tests is. And then in a perfect world, make an informed decision about one test being better than the other. Bill and I are test guys, we love tests, but we recognize that there are probably better ways to spend Saturday mornings than taking every standardized test that there is. So we're going to talk in just kind of a general way about what the ACT is.
I'm having trouble hearing.
You're having a hard time hearing this. All right, the mic. Okay, is that about right?
Yeah.
So, again, our interest in being here tonight and Ms. Parmalee and company having us here is for you all and for your sons and daughters to know a little bit about the SAT and a little bit about the ACT so that you can make an informed decision about which test is the better test to move forward with to have all the options that you'd like to have for colleges. In a general way, we really hope that people can spend time to make a decision between those two tests and not commit themselves to trying to do both the SAT and the ACT. Certainly over the last year with a redesigned SAT, these tests have become closer than ever before. But there are still differences, and ultimately, because universities will ask of students that they take one of these tests, nobody requires that they take both. So there's no need to take both of these tests, except for the purposes of diagnostically figuring out, is there one that's better than the other? I'll say really briefly that in my experience, roughly half the folks who take the SAT and the ACT will do statistically almost identically between the two tests, and maybe 20–25% will lean heavily towards the SAT or more heavily towards the ACT. So after taking tests, folks should have a pretty good idea of, oh man, that ACT thing, that's the pits, I never want to take that. Or, boy, I like that so much better. For me, that felt like a better test. And both of those things are really valuable. If people really are stuck and can't figure out which test is better, then the likelihood is there isn't one. You're going to do equally well on both tests, or sometimes, sadly, equally not so well on both tests, and that's okay. And I should say, for anyone who might feel a little bit, stressed out already, talking about not one, but two, but three tests in one night, the number of colleges across the country is growing every year that are test score optional. If you want to sort of have a really solid plan B, spend a little bit of time looking at fairtest.org. They keep a list there. It's a whole group that's committed to constantly trying to improve and alter a little bit, perhaps the outsized role that standardized tests have in the college admissions process, but they also maintain a list there of all the universities that are test score optional. So really highly selected places, Bates and Bowdoin and Wake Forest, and then down to schools that are less selective than that you might not have heard of. But it's a great place to go and get some information.
Is that fair test or fair tests?
Thank you, fairtest.org. Thank you for asking. So the big picture is that in case you don't know, the SAT College Board changed the SAT last year in a pretty fundamental way. And the big picture change was that they went away from having the SAT that we all took when we were going through high school, that was really designed to be an aptitude test that people described as kind of being tricky, that people really felt they had to know the inside tricks, and really tried to move towards a high school assessment test that really was trying to measure and also capture the learning that folks were doing in school. This, in a large way, was always what the ACT, the ground that the ACT had staked out for itself. So now the ACT and the SAT are much more alike than they've ever been in their history. The slide that was right before that, you saw the structure where, basically, we'll go back really quickly. Let me step out of the way. On the left-hand side, the SAT, on the right-hand side, the ACT. Basically long sections, exact same structure of time, very, very similar. On the next slide, the SAT, in case you didn't know this, for those of you who are old like I am, you took the SAT back in the day. There's a reading section at 200–800. There was a math section, 200–800. There was kind of a nasty little period there from 2005 to last year where there was a third section, the writing section. So three things that are at 800. And so now the College Board has gone back from the 1600 scale, from the 2400 scale back to the 1600 scale, which means that it is now safe for you to tell your kids what your SAT score is without eliciting giggles and look of sympathy and or / derision from your children, because we're back to the 1600 scale. The ACT is on a scale from 1 to 36. how many people know anything about the ACT? Okay. How many people took the ACT? Okay. So just a really quick history on this. The SAT was founded in 1926 and replaced the kind of smattering of college admissions tests that individual universities used, and allowed kids to take one test and use that for a lot of different tests, really starting at kind of New York and the East Coast. College Board won the contract with the University of California and became the college entrance exam for all of California. College Board, SAT kind of ruled the coast for a long while. In 1959, a gentleman named E.F. Lindquist, who was a professor at University of Iowa, was actually part of the College Board, had some, we'll say, disagreements, went back to Iowa and founded his own test, the ACT. Now, the ACT was sort of the test of the middle of America. For all those folks who raised your hand, I'm guessing you're from Chicago or St. Louis or New Orleans. And like the College Board is sort of like a Navy, patrolled the coast, and ACT were the Army, and they held the middle ground. And then, fast forward several decades, and now every school in the country, this is important, every school in the country will take the SAT or the ACT. In 2012, the ACT actually became the more popular test compared to the SAT. And so now we have a redesigned SAT that in many ways looks a lot like the ACT does. 1 to 36 composite scale. If you're trying to figure out how does the score compare, you can simply Google ACT, SAT composite, and that will help you, convert one score into the other.
All right, yeah. Okay. Here's what I thought I'd do for a second. I thought rather than talk about these two tests, that with a full room of adults, I would bring back some painful high school memories and show you sample questions, one or two quickly, that you might find on both exams, because I think it's pretty illustrative. We're going to give this one more shot here. No?
It's at the bottom.
Full screen.
Right there. Oh.
No.
Left. Left over.
All right. You should have asked them. Give it a second. Give it a second. Look at that. There's your audience. I will tell you this, there are a lot of standardized testing points up here, and you just saw that was pretty ugly. Thank you, Sam. Here's a sample ACT question. I'll give you a little bit of background. This is one I borrowed from near the end of an ACT math section. The significance being questions are organized on these tests in math from easiest to hardest. And so this is a problem that was designed for most people to get wrong. Okay? So with that introduction, take a quick look with me here. If the edges of a cube are reduced to half their length to produce a new smaller cube, then this smaller cube's volume is what fraction of the original cube's volume? Yeah. So, just out of curiosity, where do you think most high school eyes are going to gravitate right away? A, right? Okay, if you're cutting the dimensions in half, the volume must be cut in half. That's the kind of choice that people like us don't really want to see students picking. Like, you're allowed to make errors, but you don't want to fall into these kinds of traps, right? I would also argue that there's maybe one other choice that has sort of a trappy element to it. If they don't pick 1/2, what's the next choice you think most people might pick? I heard it, a fourth, okay? So you're down to 3 choices pretty quickly, just from avoiding something you shouldn't be doing. At which point, what we want students to do on both of these exams, SAT and ACT alike, is they should always guess, even when they aren't sure. If you want to convey one bit of information to your kids before they take PSATs and practice ACTs, they should always guess. So there are 3 options left. Solving this is really not all that sophisticated. What I would probably recommend is that a student visualize the problem by throwing in an actual number, by imagining a cube, maybe with a side of length 2, and saying, okay, the volume is 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. Okay. Now I feel like I'm teaching a class. No reaction. And if we cut each dimension in half, it's 1 times 1 times 1. Its volume would be 1, or 1/8 of the original. Okay. Very quickly on the SAT side. This is a problem I borrowed from near the end of a redesigned SAT. like the former question, it's one that most people will get wrong. And I'd actually argue that the goal is to simplify the original fraction there. What do you think is kind of the tempting move here? What do you really kind of want to do here? What are most people going to pick? I got 1A. Okay. Well, you're on it. I think it's A. I think what most people will probably do is just cross off the Y's, because that just kind of feels good. The problem is that's not math. We're not allowed to do that. And I would actually argue that B is sort of a sophisticated version of A, where we've crossed off the Y's and manipulated things a bit. So here's a case where students are down to 2 choices just by avoiding the same kind of trap. And now the actual way to do it, and I won't bore you with it, they can certainly apply, okay, algebraic strategies that they've learned from school, or they could do the exact same thing I did on the volume problem. They can make up a number for y and watch that number go through the problem. What's the point, other than like torturing you? And this is the end of the math portion of the night. The point is, neither test is getting at highly sophisticated advanced mathematics. And a couple of you noticed that earlier on when we were talking about AccuPlacer. If your child is taking pre-calculus or beyond, he or she is doing math that is far beyond what you're going to find on an SAT or ACT. I'd also argue that even here, where the 2 problems are superficially so different, the ACT has a lot of geometry on it, so you have an ACT problem. The SAT is more algebraic. The thought process is often very similar, right? Avoiding some traps, thinking outside of the box, and maybe throwing in a number into the problem to solve it. Go ahead.
So what's the right answer?
Oh, sorry. Okay. The correct answer, if we plug in the number 2, okay, y is 2. What's the top of the original fraction here? If y is 2. Okay, 8 over 2 plus 5, which is 7. So we're looking for an answer choice that matches 8/7, an answer choice that's a little more than 1. And if you just quickly glance at C, you can see that's not it. Choice C would be 6 minus 4/7, which is about 5.5. The answer is D. 10 SAT points. Okay. Go ahead. Here it is.
So most kids, when they look at the SAT and the ACT, the 2 comments that I hear most frequently about the ACT relative to the SAT is that the ACT feels more straightforward. A lot of kids, if you have a kid who is very academic but gets a little stressed about tests, oftentimes it's the she, so you can see this a little bit more, the ACT oftentimes is the better test because it feels more straightforward. The challenge with the ACT, and we'll talk about this here, is that the ACT is also more speeded. By design, people run short on time. The easiest way to really look at this is the reading comprehension on the SAT compared to the reading comp on the ACT. In a perhaps vaguely unkind way, you can think about the reading comprehension on the SAT as sort of like reading the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or the Economist. Some of it's kind of hard, where the ACT is a little bit more like reading USA Today. Okay? It's just more straightforward. By design, the SAT reading is more linguistically sophisticated. Some of the passages are easy, but some of them are demonstrably difficult. They use words like demonstrably. On the ACT, that's not the case. The ACT is much, much more straightforward, but many kids, oftentimes most folks, will struggle to finish the reading in time. And so these are just 2 different ways to assess reading. ACT, I guess, believes that really strong readers are also going to be really fast readers. Sometimes that's the case, sometimes that's not the case. So if you can, these little tiny numbers up here, for the typical reading question for the SAT, you have 1.25 minutes. For the ACT, 0.88. It's a big change, right? But again, the ACT is easier, for lack of a better word. And so this is why I can, Phil and I could probably spend 3 hours going through question after question, tell you everything there is to know about this test. But ultimately, this is something that your sons and daughters have to experience for themselves because we can't really make that judgment for them. when your kids take these tests, you're going to be able to compare an SAT versus an ACT, the scores themselves. But one of the things you really want to also ask is, did you like one better than the other? And then if they say yes, ask them, can you tell me why? Or can you explain that? Try not to say why, because in many households, why sounds like a question, but it's really an accusation with a question mark at the end. So you just want to be mindful of that if you're really trying to get good information out of them. But so, again, we see that the ACT is much more speeded. One thing that Phil didn't bring up, because he didn't bring up 100 different questions, one of the big changes on the math of the SAT is the math problems became basically reading comprehension. The math problems on the SAT now are incredibly wordy. There's actually just an article, was it in Reuters, Phil, that basically looked at the degree to which there's seemingly a creeping bias on the math of the SAT for folks who don't have the reading skills to do well. And so it used to be, I'm not a reader, but boy, at least I can handle math. Now you get these questions that are miles long, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't have my safe space anymore. So again, with these tests, we want to take a look at them, but the big picture thing, again, for most kids with the ACT is they feel it to be more straightforward, but they feel it to be more speedy. And so this is important. If you have a son or daughter who has accommodations for extended time, for a language-based learning disability, for anxiety, for ADHD, that extra time tends to confer a greater advantage on the ACT than it does on the SAT. Again, for all these things, I'm talking in generalities. The other thing I'll make a point, I'll really quickly follow up on Phil's point about, we can plug in numbers, there are great ways to be strategic. Some kids really take to that well, and some kids really seem hell-bent on doing things kind of in the most mathematical, old-fashioned way. And part of that's just how they perform. Because there is a stress component to these tests for most kids, taking these practice tests, taking them with Phil, taking them with me, taking them timed is so important, because we get different performance when we're under pressure. Some people actually do a little better under stress, and some people do considerably worse under stress. And so again, to help have an informed decision, doing these tests under time conditions and feeling comfortable with, I'm great on time, or realizing, oh, I'm kind of stuck on time, is awfully important. Okay, and this is the science section. So if we look at big picture structure, SAT and ACT, they both have a reading section, they both have a math section, they both have a writing or grammar section, English section, which is almost the exact same thing, in part because College Board just opened a brand new headquarters in Iowa City, Iowa. They had the redesign of their test was really fast, and they needed a lot of talent to make a great test. And so their new office, they have one in Manhattan and one here in Western Virginia, and one in Iowa City, Iowa. Does anyone by chance know where the headquarters is for the ACT? Iowa City, Iowa, that's right. So the writing section on the SAT almost could not look more like the writing section on the ACT. In many ways, that's the closest part of the test. The outlier, the big difference between these two tests is that the ACT has a science section. And Kind of, I'll say this to you now, most kids feel vaguely traumatized by the science section because in many ways it's neither fish nor fowl. It kind of acts like a reading section, but looks like a science section. In some ways it's kind of neither. One of my colleagues at work is a PhD in chemical engineering from Berkeley, which basically means he's a big geek, and he's really good at this stuff. And he will explain to you that it's really not a science section, it's kind of the reading charts and graphs section. Okay? So what kids need to do is learn how to be quick at going to the right chart, finding 1.2, going down, finding the number. And it's a skill. It's really based on skills that they already have from their biology, from the physics, from the chemistry. But this is not a test that tests extant knowledge. You don't have to have taken physics to do well on this test, in part because there are also questions beyond chemistry, physics, and biology. Oh, I don't know, there's meteorology. I don't know about the meteorology course here. Volcanology, study volcanoes, kind of everything you can possibly imagine. But that's not really what the test is about. It's about the tools of reading charts and graphs. And so I say this, when we give the ACT here and all these chairs are filled with your sons and daughters taking the practice test, my colleague and I will come through and explain that to folks, and they go, okay, great, great, great. And about half of them will follow our advice, which means don't read everything, kind of go at it. And half of them can't help themselves, and they'll read everything. And they'll be like 98% accurate on about 60% of it, and then they and run out of time. And they'll get a science score that feels traumatic, and then they'll be convinced, I cannot do the ACT, I should never do it. And that might be the case. That it might mean that they really should take the SAT, but it might be simply that they just need a little bit of time of reading a book or spending some time with a class or a tutor or mom or dad and just practice that and get comfortable with that. So that's the basic deal on the science section. So don't let your kids run away from the ACT simply because they had one bad experience. Make them have at least 2 bad experiences with the science and then let them quit.
But yeah, in terms of the convergence between the exams, it's funny. Even on the science piece, you can see College Board and the SAT having co-opted quite a bit from ACT. The SAT does not have a formal science section. It doesn't have that dense, intimidating section that can cause PTSD. But about 3 dozen SAT questions on the new exam are scientifically oriented.